pleasure to see you and to meet you. I watched the documentary again today, and it was so impressive, um, and it reminded me all the great people that your your dad worked with over the years. It's an incredible list.
I know it is. It is. It's very impressive. He was often asked if he minded being typecast, and he said no, he didn't mind, but he said actually he's a very lucky actor who is typecast. He felt very fortunate for that. But if you look at the breadth of his career and the numbers of different actors with whom he had an opportunity to work, and the variety of the work that he did. I mean, he made almost 170 films. He starred on Broadway in five plays. He had three television series of his own. He did an immense body of radio work.
So, along with all the major stars your dad was friends with and worked with. He also was friendly with all the other ones who did horror films. And I know he didn't like the term horror films, but he
Yeah.
was friends with Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi. So you see them all in these movies and in pictures. It's just incredible.
Well, Lon Chaney Sr., of course, was the star on the lot when my father was just a coming up extra. And unfortunately, Lon Chaney Sr. died prematurely. But the story my father always told was that one night he was waiting at a bus stop in the rain for the bus to come along to get home. And Lon Chaney Sr. saw him there and stopped and gave him a ride home. And Chaney Sr. was a big star at this time. My father was totally unknown. And my father evidently asked him if he had any advice for an up and coming starving actor. And Cheney said, "Find something to do that nobody else wants to do or is willing to do, and then do it better than anybody else." And a few years later, along came the opportunity for my father to play Frankenstein. Of course, Cheney, had he not died at way too young, um, would have done the role, would have been offered the part. And then Bela Lugosi had been offered the part and he turned it down. And then James Whale offered the part to my father. And that was the opportunity and the type of role that Cheney Sr. had advised my father to indeed look for and take and do better than anybody else would do. And that was a pivotal difference in my father's life, both personally and professionally. So he didn't really know Lon Chaney Sr. as a friend, but he certainly gave my father some invaluable advice at a very important point in my father's career. He, of course, worked with Bela. I think they made seven films together.
Mhm.
And I know Bela Jr., and I know Ron Chaney, who is Chaney Sr.'s great grandson. And then I know Lynn Lugosi Sparks, who is Bela Senior's granddaughter. And so the new generation, although I'm not new and neither is Bela Jr., but we are the current generation. And then Ron Chaney, we all are friends and we all know each other, and we have done many panels together, and it's wonderful for us to know one another, and the fans love it when we do a panel together. It's fun.
I, I look forward to wherever you're doing that. I'm gonna go and attend for sure.
Now, where do you teach?
I teach at full time at a community college, and then I teach part time at Montclair State University, where I
Oh,
teach.
I've been to Montclair. I have I've spoken there. at Montclair, and I know one of the teachers there, one of the professors there. And
Oh,
so I'll be in Montclair. Oh, you have the best lobster restaurants in Montclair. And I love the city of Montclair. And I have a
very.
good friend, Ilmar Vanderer from Montclair. And so I spend a lot of time in Montclair in October. Perhaps our paths will cross in October because I'll
Yes,
be
I.
back there. I'll be back there for Chiller Theater, which is Halloween weekend. And I always done that show for probably 25 years. And um, and I will indeed be in Montclair if for no other reason to have lobster, but also to visit the university there. And so I hope our paths will cross.
Oh, I think so. I know you were just here for Halloween, and then you did you did. I think you were on the Montclair cable station too, and
Yes,
so
I was.
oh, that's wonderful. So
Well, I'll be in your neck of the woods. So, and
oh,
I
good.
hope to do some more work in Cranford too,
Oh,
at
I
the
hope
theater
so.
there. Yeah, I've done that the past 2 years. So, well, I'll see to it our paths cross.
Oh, we're definitely looking forward to it, and so many wonderful meetings in life, I'm so glad to know you through here through the Zoom experience. When by the way, when you look back on your father's life, um, it's interesting in his biography. Just like any great career, I guess you have to make your own luck, and at very amazing times, he ran into the right people um, who had him go on Broadway or make a film. Do you see a pattern, or was it just pure, his skill plus luck, or was there a pattern to things? Is it hard to say?
You know, he considered himself so lucky to have been able to spend his life doing something he really loved. And then he laughed and said, and be jolly well paid for it. But the truth of the matter is, he spent, he was British and he came over from England at age 21 to British Columbia, thinking he had a job with a farmer, which the farmer had never heard of. And he did employ him. My father spent 10 years in British Columbia, learning his craft as an actor, working with three different repertory theater groups, sometimes getting paid, sometimes not. Um, so uh, his luck wasn't so very good during those 10 years. Um, he presented himself as an experienced British actor to the first um, producer of the first repertory theater group. He told the story on himself that his salary was $30 a week when the curtain went up on his first performance in
Hmm.
British Columbia. It was $15 a week when the curtain came down on his first performance because it was abundantly clear he'd never set foot on a stage before. Um, Eventually, he made his way down into the States and he was an extra and he sustained himself by uh, oh, working on railways, working for up in British Columbia, worked with the doing digging ditches, building sets, painting sets, anything to not starve to death. And then when he came down to country, he came down to um, really work on the again on the stage, not giving any thought to film, and just by happenstance, he auditioned for a film part and he got it. But Frankenstein was his 81st film, and he, by his own telling, he said nobody saw the first 80. So, he was an extremely modest man, but he'd been in the business 20 years before he made Frankenstein. So, was it luck? Was it timing? It certainly was bad luck for Cheney Sr. He died. It was perhaps bad judgment on Bailiff's part for Lugosi for turning the role down. Was that good luck on my father's part, or was it the genius of Jack Pierce and the makeup, or was it a marriage of talents with between James Whale, Alan Clive, the rest of the cast, the basic storyline, my father's interpretation of the role, and this combination of talents and that came together and made this film that nobody knew if it was going to be how it was going to be received, and nobody expected it to be the iconic film it turned out to have become. My father wasn't even invited to the premiere. Um, was that good luck or good talent? I think it was a lot of both for everybody involved with that film. Colin Clive was anticipated to be the star of the film. Turned out the monster was. I mean, there were so many unexpected things come out of that film um, that I don't think you can say what made it the success that it was exactly, but it certainly made it was a pivotal difference in my father's life.
Mhm. In so that was the breakthrough, the breakout film that made him famous,
Oh, absolutely.
and oh yes, and then in both in that one plus the Mummy, um, it's quite clear that it's him playing these roles, but the makeup is so brilliant and it's
Oh,
not overdone, so you can still see all his physical qualities and his and he was also tall, and so and his voice is just perfect for everything. So
well, he
I
really wasn't that tall. He was 5'11".
5'11".
So that's not really that tall if you think about it. I mean, he wasn't quite 6 feet tall. It was camera angle. For Frankenstein, he
The
wore
heels,
plaster boots. They were
yeah.
only elevated him by no more than 2 inches.
Hmm.
It was the shortening of the sleeves that made his arms look so long, and it was camera angle shooting up and making him look tall. In The Mummy, The Mummy is more a love story than a horror film. It's really a love story. The sets were magnificent in The Mummy. Um, a funny story when he was um, the makeup was um, finished being applied, the wardrobe, if you like, or the wrapping for Imhotep. Um, he pointed out they had neglected to put in a fly. Pretty major forgetting. So that had to be redone.
Hmm.
And then that took almost as long to put on that makeup and the Artist Bay makeup as it took to put on the Frankenstein makeup. And at the end of the shooting day for Imhotep, my father collapsed on the set from dehydration because the gauze had just simply absorbed all his bodily fluids. And he simply collapsed at the end. It was a very long makeup morning, very early, as with Frankenstein, and then a very long shooting day. And although you only see him briefly in that makeup in the film, it was a torturous day of film work. And then from then on, you only see him, essentially, you only see him as Artist Bay. So those two makeups, once again, were the work of Jack Pierce, the makeup artist, who that my father always referred to as an absolute genius and credited back with um, making him um, so outstanding on the screen. It was he always said it was Jack's genius that made him so look so special on the screen.
Yes, in Frankenstein, he there's such a human quality he gives to the part too. We the audience feels very sad for what Frankenstein's going through, and that I remember that famous shot where Frankenstein's reaching up towards the sunlight,
Oh yes,
and it movies. I've been watching that movie since I was a little kid, so I think I even mentioned in an email that I first saw The Grinch when it first came out. It might be 1966. I was 6 years old. My daughter's 7, and we just watched it about 5 times at Christmas. So,
oh good. It's wonderful. I mean, it's part of everyone's Christmas now, and it's wonderful. You know, it's I've been fortunate enough to know be at a show with and on a panel with Chuck Jones' daughter uh, and his grandson, and just delightful. They're a delightful family, and um, the Grinch. I have a life-size Grinch in my living room at Christmas time that moves and talks and music, and it's just wonderful. My dog barks at it all Christmas season, but it's I mean the Grinch is just delightful. And my dad won a Grammy for the Grinch, and
mhm.
when the Grammy Awards were um, happening, my dad was in England, so he had his agent accept the award for him. And then the next time my dad came over from England to work in Los Angeles again, he of course went to his agent's office, and his agent had his Grammy, and he said, "Here, Boris, here's your Grammy." So my dad took it and looked at it, and he said, his Grammy, and he said, "It looks like a bloody doorstop." He took it and took it over and put it at his agent's door as a doorstop and left it there. My dad was not into awards and that sort of thing. He was the consummate professional, but he was not in the profession to win awards. He was in it to do the best job he could every time he set foot on the stage. And he loved what he did. The people with whom he worked respected him and liked him, admired him, and the people who knew him personally adored him. He was just a really fine human being.
Yes, I got the feeling one can see and one can read about how elegant he was, and he was modest, and um,
Very,
and had a wonderful charm and also storytelling skills, and also people said he was funny as well.
very funny, lovely sense of humor, very often very self effacing in his humor and in his modesty.
Oh, can I ask you a couple of questions if we can get back to the mummy too before I
Sure.
forget as well? Okay, because we covered a little bit of the Frankenstein. I sometimes show my students images, scenes from Frankenstein and also the mummy, and I say, see, you don't need $50 million of special effects. It really ruins a film quite often. Just the naturalistic makeup and great acting really is ominous enough, and so it's a great lesson in artistry. Um, uh, what's your view of the Mummy? Do you remember when you first saw it, and what do you think of it today? Like, do you still see it once in a while? How do you? What's your interpretation?
Well, it's one of the worst kept secrets is that I don't like scary movies. It's terrible casting, me as my father's daughter. But the first time, I'll back up a bit. The first time that I saw Frankenstein, I was 19 years old. I saw it on television, alone in my living room, and by that time, of course, I'd heard so much about it that I watched it rather studiously. I saw The Mummy not long thereafter, and I was absolutely fascinated by it because there are so many parts to The Mummy. There's, of course, the magnificent sets, the dual role he plays, and how different those two roles are, and that it really isn't a horror or terror film. It's the way the roles are played and the individual scenes, the emotion that goes into those scenes, is what makes it frightening. But it's not a horror film. It's
Mhm.
cast in the horror genre of films, but it's a very romantic film of broken hearts and missed opportunities and long-standing love and those sets are just magnificent, just unbelievable. And there's no special effects and no phoniness to any of it. It is just, it's a film of just unbelievable beauty. So I'm overwhelmed by the artistry of the film in and of itself. And then its storyline is really a very sad storyline. And again, a lot of misunderstanding.
Mhm. It it I happen to be friends with some Egyptologists, and I sometimes talk about all sorts of subjects. And I might have mentioned in an email that Salima Ikram is one of the most famous mummy specialists, and she and others have said that that's her favorite mummy movie of all time.
Yeah.
And
And
it
that's a huge compliment.
yes,
It's a
yes,
compliment to the overall film, and the way they portrayed it, um, with respect and with understanding of those times, the reality of those times.
yes, yes. It did capture. I mean, the 1930s and that glamorous look, and it also captured some of the mystery of Egypt as well. So I really,
Absolutely.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
um, it's one period of time imposed on another period of time. And the, the melding of those two very different time periods of history, was beautifully done. It's really a very beautiful film.
it really is. And like you said, a love story over the ages. And so that's kind of like, Plato's ideal of true love, the
Yeah,
two through the ages, two souls mingling and so on. Um, Uh, oh, you mentioned that it was kind of difficult to do that role because of the makeup and the heat and so on. I recall reading somewhere that the makeup was it clay? Was it some sort of clay and then it dried? Is that how they got the
yes,
look?
yeah, and they used to. I have a family photo. Um, they used a hair dryer. They would apply a layer and then dry it with a hair dryer, and then moisten it again and another layer and dry it with a hair dryer. It went forever. And Artist Bay, if you look at that makeup up closely, um, the the wrinkles and the crustiness of that makeup is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's what happens to old ladies like me once they get a certain age.
You look you look you look much younger. Yeah.
Not much
Yes.
younger than the Artist Bay, no.
No, you look much younger than your years. I know a little about you from reading some biographical.
Everybody knows how old I am. They just don't know how old I feel.
I guess when you make a documentary and you say when you were born and when,
Everybody says when I was born, and mainly because I share my birthday with my father.
that's an interesting coincidence.
Not really. I was born cesarean. Very little coincidence in cesarean birth.
That's funny. And well, let's see. Okay, then I wanted to, did your um where did you live? Where was your family house? Was it in California? And also did you live in England as well?
No, my father did,
You lived in
but and he returned to England.
hmm
But I was born in Hollywood. We lived in Beverly Hills, and then I was raised in San Francisco. And now I live in so I'm a native Californian. Um, I guess you could say I have full citizenship with the UK and the USA.
That's
Because
great.
my father always retained his British subjectship and never became an American citizen, even though he spent um, almost all of his working life in this country. He retained his British subjectship.
And how old were you when your father passed away?
30.
So, what was it like when you used to walk around with your dad in Hollywood or other places? I could just imagine people used to probably look at you and stare and walk up to you, run
Well,
up.
um, um, one of the most um, interesting times with my father was in an elevator because people didn't know whether or not to mind their manners or take advantage of the situation. But back then, people were better mannered than they are today. There was a lot of nudging and elbow nudging in the elevator because he was highly recognizable. Both his voice and his visage. But um, but when we got off the elevator, and if you turned around and looked back at the elevator, everybody was pointing and no, that much. Um, and and he drove a convertible a lot, and at a stop sign, it was always interesting. Um, but but when we'd go, for instance, when we would go out to dinner, and we went to the Brown Derby quite a bit, and as did a lot of celebrities. Um, and I was a brat. I'd run around the back of the not chairs, the back of the booths. I was a terrible brat. Um, but he was always gracious to his fans, no matter if he had a mouthful of food and was trying to enjoy a peaceful evening. And you have to understand for celebrities, it's you can't just go to the market. You can't just go out to dinner. Um, and if you do, then you know what you're in for, and you should be gracious. Not all are.
No.
My father always was. He understood how lucky he was, and he had paid his dues, um, and he he appreciated his fans. He was always aware of the other side of the coin. He had 20, as I said, he had spent 20 years in the business before he had the opportunity to make Frankenstein. And if it hadn't been for that film, he would still have been a bit part player. So he was one of the founding members of the Screen Actors Guild.
hmm
His card number was number 9, and he never talked about it, but he knew how important it was to for incoming actors to have a voice um, about when they had a problem, have a union, and the forming of a union at that time by the actors against the studios and against the producers and being vocal about the conditions. What those 15 actors were putting their careers on the line, and my mother said that they would um, dance by one another on the dance floor and say, meeting Tuesday night at so and so's house, and dance on by. I mean, it was really, it was really dangerous to their careers when they formed the Screen Actors Guild. And my dad then remained on the board of directors for years and years and years. Um, it was work that he felt was really important, and he was so pleased to be involved with it. He never talked about it. Nor did he talk about his work and bring it home, nor did he talk about other actors.
I was wondering about that. Um, and it is amazing that he's one of the founders of the Screen Actors Guild. How important that is. I remember that photo of him and James Cagney and some of the others. Um, so he did films with Barrymore, with Edward G. Robinson, James Cagney. There's the list is pretty long. So um, did he talk about them much, or did he ever socialize with them, or it was mainly
Oh,
a professional?
socialized, sure.
Oh, he did, yes.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy Cagney was a good family friend. And he was impressed by the fact that he had the opportunity to work with the Barrymores. I mean, that impressed him. He was thrilled to death.
Hmm.
Um, and he said they were so generous that they wanted to be sure that the camera picked him up, the Barrymores did, picked him up on the screen, not just them, which is nice to know, about the Barrymores. And if he ever said anything about any actor, it was always something kind.
It's a wonderful life lesson to hear about your father, and quite often people in that era were very polite, and it's just great when artists support other artists instead of
It
wanting
is.
to jump in front of the camera. That's really a great lesson for actors and writers today.
It is. It is.
Um,
They're few and far between today.
hmm hmm So true. Now you must have had a kind of incredible and fun childhood growing up in Hollywood. And did it help your career as well? Because you've also did a lot of acting as well.
I haven't
So
done any acting. I
didn't you
haven't done
do?
any acting.
Did you do any? So you didn't have much of an interest in acting at all?
No, I didn't. And I haven't done any acting. My When my father was on Broadway in Peter Pan, um, uh, I went back east to see it, and I was there, I think, 5 days, and he arranged for me to see it from the wings and from backstage and out front and everything. And at the end of my visit, he said, "Well, I can tell you don't have fire in the belly," which is a theater term.
If I could ask you a few Hollywood stories, and then maybe if I could ask you about some of the other things, I might do something. I'm working on a few projects, and I can tell you about them later. And then I'd like to go back to maybe the Mommy and maybe the Monster Mash too is an amazing song. Your father did that, right?
Yeah, he did do it on some television program. Yeah, but Bobby Pickett was very kind, and we let us play it on our website. But um, then my webmaster inadvertently took it off our web page, and now we don't know how to put it back on. But I had the opportunity of meeting Bobby Pickett, and he was very nice.
That song is very famous especially at Halloween.
Yeah,
it's played a lot. I mean, I can't. I think that and the Michael Jackson one, the Thriller, are the two that are the most famous. I think
yeah.
they're just always played. That's pretty amazing. In many ways, your father's so tied to rituals and holidays like Christmas through the Grinch, and then this Halloween, the Mummy movie.
You know, my father always said that Halloween was his busy season.
I can imagine. That'd be an interesting study to see the influence on of the movies on Halloween, because those are still some of the big. There's just still two of the biggest outfits, the Mummy and the and Frankenstein. Um,
I know they play them a lot over in October
hmm
on television.
hmm
Yeah, it's
um,
amazing.
yes, yes. The uh, the Frankenstein. I mean, going back to the Mary Shelley novel, it's from she wrote it. She said it and then wrote it down, and it finally got published around 1818. So it has a long history, and your father's movie helped keep it going, and now it's still such a big part of American culture.
It is. I mean, her novel is taught in universities all over the world in so many languages, and it's amazing. I mean, it's over 100 years old, well over, and and then the film was done in 31, and then followed by two other Frankenstein roles that my father played, and then certainly many other Frankenstein films that my father had decided not to play the role anymore because he felt such a debt of gratitude to the character and the role, and he felt that after the first three films that the role was going to become the brunt of bad scripts and bad jokes, and he didn't want any part of that because he really did feel such a debt of gratitude for that role and what the difference it made in his life. So it was his decision not to play it more than the three times.
That had great foresight and wisdom, that he didn't want it to become parodied, or he felt it was played out. That was really good timing.
Well, I think he was sincere in what he verbalized, and that was that he didn't want to be a part of it becoming a real monster, a real killing machine, and he didn't want it to become the brunt of bad jokes and bad scripts.
hmm hmm Um, in terms of horror in general, and your father liked other terms. I remember it was one was
Terror.
terror, and shock terror.
Terror.
Um,
Yeah, he felt it was important to leave a lot up to the imagination and the intelligence and participation of the audience. You didn't need to dump it in their laps and insult their intelligence. And he felt very strongly about that. My father edited and wrote forewords and introductions to many books. He was a very well read, very well educated, very articulate man, and had a wonderful education in England. And he was a voracious reader, and he conducted his own life, in a gentlemanly fashion, and he treated others the way he would like to be treated. And he was a very kind, very thoughtful, very generous, very funny human being.
hmm hmm
The antithesis of the roles he played.
Yes, yes. And then, so that's interesting about his aesthetic. You can see it in the movies. So he really felt that you should allow for the not to dumb down movies, and not to be slasher films, but to have the natural terror and the drama play out, and be more subtle. That's
Yeah, and not insult the intelligence of the audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let them participate in the suspense. Was far better than shock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did he have any favorite authors that you recall?
Conrad, Joseph Conrad.
I remember
was
that
his
now.
favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great that he loved Conrad. I mean, Heart of Darkness, and then the one about um, Lord Jim and some others. Those are great. Those, yeah, he's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
And he had the opportunity on television opposite Roddy McDowell to perform in Heart of Darkness on one of the, I think, Playhouse 90 programs on television.
That's incredible. I'd love to look for that to see if it's anywhere.
Oh, it's available.
Oh,
It's available.
oh, that's incredible. And so what were some of the movies he loved, and some of the actors he loved as well?
He didn't talk about his work.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't talk about other actors, except one time, well, more than once, but he said that he thought that George Kennedy was a really fine actor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was doing a convention, a show back east, at which Mr. Kennedy was a guest. And I thought, oh, good, I'll have an opportunity to tell him what my father said, and that my father never talked about other actors. And so I made a point of going over to where George Kennedy's table was, and I introduced myself, and he was very, very delightful to me. And I said, I'd like to share something with you. And I said, I don't know if you ever met my father. And he said, no, but I always wanted to.
Oh.
And I said, well, my father never talked about other actors, except he made a point of telling me one time that he thought you were such a fine actor. And Mr. Kennedy started to cry.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and he said, thank you so much. I admired your father as a person and as an actor, and to know that he said that about me means more to me than you'll ever know. And I thought, I'm so glad that I told him that. So glad that I had the opportunity to tell him that. But that shows in what high regard my father was held by other actors. And I just was so glad that I had a chance to share that with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so much out of doing so, because I then saw the reverence with which my father was held by other actors. So it was a two-way gift. It was lovely.
That's wonderful. Yes, I could see what he saw in George Kennedy. I remember those movies like Cool Hand Luke and others over the years. I kind of grew up on those as well. Speaking of acting, did you see your father get ready for roles, or did he ever talk about how he got ready?
No.
Mm-hmm.
No. Somebody asked him if he followed the actor studio roles, and he sort of smiled and said, I really don't think much of the method acting, the actor's studio. And then, for the life of me, I can't remember who he quoted, but some very well-known, very well-respected Broadway actor, about how he was asked how he prepared for his roles. This other actor had been asked. And he said, well, I wait for my cue, I check my fly, and I go on and try not to bump into anybody. So my father was really saying that's about what he does too.
Sure, sure. That sounds maybe the little that I know about English actors in terms of they're more naturalistic and maybe less histrionic and so on.
Indeed.
did
Indeed.
didn't he act with some other stellar figures? Like did he act? Was he in some movies with Charles Lawton and also
Yes.
Laurence Olivier as well?
I'm not sure about Olivier, probably, but yes, with Lawton he did. Yeah.
Hmm. Your father was in so many movies. It would be a lot of work to write a whole book about everything that he did. That would be immense.
Well, there is a wonderful biography written by an English author named Stephen Jacobs,
Hmm.
and the book is called Boris Karloff, More Than a Monster. And
I
it's a wonderful book. And Stephen spent 10 years researching this book.
I think that I
If you don't have it, get it.
I have that one at school, and then I have this one too.
Oh, Dear Boris, that was written by my godmother.
Is that right?
Dear Boris, yeah.
Mhm.
And she said that whenever she'd interview somebody for the book about my father, they would almost always, to a person, preface their remarks and say, "Oh, dear Boris." So that's where the title came from. But the book that you should get is Stephen Jacobs' book called Boris Karloff, More Than a Monster. And it's lengthy, it's accurate, it's 10 years of his research went into this book. He is about to come out with another book called Boris Karloff Compendium. Wonderful, seldom if ever seen photographs, and then the films in order. And then he's going to write an update on his Boris Karloff More Than a Monster book.
Sounds
He's
great.
a wonderful author. He's a very good friend of mine.
Hmm.
But his book is the biography, and there have been lots. So I recommend that.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I definitely will look at that. We'll get that book. Does stuff still pop up like movies that had vanished and they pop up somewhere like silent films or letters
Yes,
or documents from your father?
documents and letters. I don't see them. I don't know that they don't pop up, but I'm not aware of that. But films, silent films, yes, there's a man named Eric Grayson who is a film restorer, and he is just, he's still working on because more footage keeps showing up. But he restored King of the Congo, which is one of my father's silent films. He has restored many silent films, and he is still working on King of the Congo. However, it has been put out and shown, and it's amazing work. And there are other silent film restorers who have done work on my father's silent films, but there are still some that are lost or beyond restoration. But the count of films, I believe, is like 167 films that he made. He made a lot of serials, and a lot of silent films because he was in Hollywood for 10 years, and he said he was the only one who knew it. So
It's amazing
there's
how. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Oh, it's amazing how hardworking some of the actors were, like your dad. I know that Frankenstein was maybe 1931, and then he was in other movies that year, and then maybe
Oh yeah,
the Mummy, and that was a big year, and he was in other movies that same year.
yes, yeah. Oh yeah, certainly before Screen Actors Guild was formed, and before an actor gained any fame, they were treated like pieces of meat by the studios. They had no rights whatsoever. And there are some fairly... I'm presently reading a script that somebody has submitted to me just to read about the making of Frankenstein and the what went into the making of it. I'll put it that way. It's pretty horrifying.
Oh, it was very exhausting.
Long hours.
Long hours. Yes. Yes.
Long hours and lots of retakes and things that wouldn't happen today.
What about the famous scene where Frankenstein has to pick up the little girl? That bothered your father a lot, I recall.
Yes. Marilyn was her real name. Had the stage mother of all stage mothers. And, I mean, that's just well-known history. And Marilyn was not afraid of my father. She wanted to ride with my father in the car in makeup. And she'd take my father's hand, where Mae Clark, on the other hand, was terrified of my father in makeup. And my father said, now, when you see me, one of my arms will be a bit off camera, and I'll wiggle my little finger, and you'll know it's me. And so you don't have to be afraid. And that was Mae Clark, the bride in the Frankenstein original film. But the little girl was not afraid of him.
That's amazing.
Children got it. Yeah, children got it. They understood he was the victim and not the perpetrator. And his actions were reactive, not proactive. And they were reactive to, for instance, Fritz's torturing the creature with the torch, etc. And there are stories about that scene and being takes, etc. Interesting things went on that set. So SAG was a blessing to many, many, many actors.
Yes. So such an important organization, and I know those Hollywood moguls had huge power, and they were dictators, and so many horrible things written about them. I mean, they created great films, but they really did a lot of burdensome and horrible things to a lot of actors.
And the directors did.
Yes.
They were all powerful. So it in different times.
Yes. And now how are you doing for time now? Are you okay? Or
I'm going to run out of time because I have to get pretty dressed up. I'm being picked up at 4:30. It's now 10 after 3.
Sure.
So by 3:30 is my absolute limit, and it's 10 after 3.
Okay. Should we spend a few? I don't want to put any
No, that's
pressure on you.
fine. That's fine.
Because you've been
No, if you have some more questions that you want to ask, that's fine.
Okay. You've been very generous with your time, and my daughter Inanna. She's got a mythical name, Inanna, and I show her these classic films, so she loves it. So she loves The Mummy and Frankenstein, and then now we were just watching the new Wednesday, the Addams series, the Addams family.
Oh yes, yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I know Danny Roebuck very well. Who's in that?
Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
Is he What is he? Is he an actor? Was he?
Yeah, Danny Roebuck, I think, plays Grandpa
Oh, I see.
in the new Adams.
I see. My daughter went as Wednesday Adams, and my wife looks. My wife is like Morticia's because she's got the long black hair. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I had a couple more films. A couple more questions.
I'm trying to think of Roberta's last name at the university at Montclair.
Does Roberta teach film or literature?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would recognize her last name. I can't remember it. That's terrible. I can't remember her last name, but she teaches. She's on the faculty at Montclair.
She might be in English. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure. I can.
Yeah, but say hello if you find her. Say hello to her for me.
Oh yes.
And I'll be on campus in October, the week before Halloween. I'll be on campus. I know.
That's wonderful.
Having lunch with Roberta.
Oh.
Okay.
Sounds good. Of course, if I can be of any help, anything, if you need a ride, anything, just.
Thank you so much.
I'll remind you, of course.
Okay. And we will absolutely get together when I'm back, yes.
Oh, that'll be wonderful. And I should ask you some other questions about that era too. I know your father had the name he picked out was Boris Karloff, but his name was William
Henry Pratt.
William Henry Pratt.
And he never changed it legally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And his story was that Karloff came from his mother's side of the family way back, but no biographer has ever been able to find it. And Boris came from thin air. That's his story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Who knows?
Interesting. Did he have any? Because that was part of his background and your background. Did he have any interest in India, or did he visit India? I know his parents lived there at one time.
I always get this wrong, but it's his grandmother on his father's side and his grandfather on his mother's side, or vice versa, were each East Indian. And thus the skin coloring, eye coloring, hair coloring, and my oldest son has dark coloring as I do, as did my father, so I don't know where the name came from, really, Karloff, or Boris. Thin air. But I don't know where the name Karloff came from. And he, to my knowledge, he never went to India. And I don't think he ever shot a film in India.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And his brothers reached high positions as well in diplomatic circles.
They served in India and China in the consular service. He had a brother who was knighted for his service in China. He would refer to his brother. He would refer to his brother John as my brother, the Sir.
So your uncle was a Sir, okay?
My uncle was a Sir, yes. And my father was the youngest of 9 children by 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he had 1 sister.
And what did your dad do for fun? I know he loved. Was he a walker? Cricket. I know he loved cricket.
He loved the game of cricket. And he loved to read.
Mm-hmm.
He loved gardening. He loved animals. At one time, he and my mother had 22 dogs in Beverly Hills. They brought the first Bedlington Terrier which is a kind of dog that looks like a lamb. I have one in this room somewhere. They brought the first Bedlington Terrier over from England to the West Coast in the 30s. He had a pig named Violet. He had he had some turkeys. The house that I grew up in was on 3.5 acres, so they could do all this in Beverly Hills. So he loved the outdoors, but his passion was the game of cricket. He played with C. Aubrey Smith on the Hollywood cricket team.
Oh.
He was one of the members of that, and of course he played in England at school. He always said he was, he was just a miserable player, but I know he was a very, very avid watcher of the game. When he'd go home to England, he had a friend, Bernie Coleman, with whom he went to the cricket matches, and he would say every time he'd go to a cricket match, he'd say, I think I've died and gone to heaven. He just loved it.
Yes, I got that feeling. Cricketers and cricket lovers, whatever they're called, I know they have a strong love, and I got that from reading about your father.
And he was a passionate reader, avid reader, and I don't know, trying to think of other things.
You had a lot of land.
I'm surrounded in my office by original art that people send me, some wonderful Karloff art, wonderful drawings that people send me. I have a room in my house called the Bathing with Boris bathroom. It's wonderful photographs and wonderful three-dimensional art, sculptors and sculpts and figures that people send me that they've done. And on my webpage, we have an artist gallery so that these artists can get exposure for their work. And I encourage people to visit our webpage and see some of the beautiful art that is in our artist gallery.
I'm going to mention that to my students and others to look at the web. I've seen the webpage. I'll mention that to them as well.
Yeah, it's the talent, the artistic talent out there is just incredible.
And so you had that's a lot of acreage in Hollywood. You had a big spread there.
It was big. We had a tennis court and a pool and lots of gardening space and a bit of an orchard. And, and a rose garden, and people always said if my father buried his friends in the rose garden, but indeed he did not.
And you had an incredible number of animals. That's you both are true animal lovers.
Indeed, yeah, 4-legged ones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have my cat right here, and we have a river, and we moved to Cranford because there's a river in our backyard, and the birds keep swooping over.
Oh,
and
how wonderful!
Yes.
How wonderful! Yeah.
And,
well, I spend my summers up at Lake Tahoe. I love water. What I'm doing living in the desert, I really don't know. But I've lived here a long time.
So that's great. You have the desert environment, and then you go to Tahoe for some pine trees and water, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Tahoe is some of God's best work. Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful.
I used to teach in Reno at the college, and so I know.
Did you?
Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah. My place is on the West Shore, which is the quiet shore. It's on the California side, and it's just gorgeous. I've been going there since I was 2 and God was a boy.
Do you ever go to some of those little towns? Like, I'm trying to think of them. Maybe Virginia City or Truckee.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Truckee. Oh, yeah.
Truckee.
Go to Truckee a lot. Yeah, because I'm actually, let's see, I'm 23 miles away from Truckee.
Oh, very
I
nice.
wish. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I go to Reno a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I love it up there.
Yeah.
I really have been going there since I was 2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Reno, I like it. It's a it's a quieter version of Las Vegas. It's got,
Much quieter.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, more.
I like Reno.
Yeah, nice place. And I found people very friendly out there, and I miss the low traffic and the all that stuff.
Indeed. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't drive in New Jersey for anything.
Mhm.
Or in New York. Oh, no, I have a friend who drives me, who lives in where the university is, and I love it back there, but you couldn't pay me to drive there. And we lived there when my dad was in Arsenic and Old Lace. We lived in Darien, and you couldn't pay me to live back there now.
Yeah, it's getting crowded. That's right. Your father was in Arsenic and Old Lace on Broadway.
Yes.
That was a big
And
play.
he was in The Lark opposite Julie Harris, and he was in Peter Pan, and then he was in The Linden Tree and On Borrowed Time. So he starred in 5 Broadway plays. So he had a versatile career.
He's so versatile. Like like when I read about Dean Martin, he succeeded in everything he did. That's like your father. He was big on Broadway and movies and music and television. So he covered it
He
all.
had 3 television series of his own: A Thriller, The Veil, and Colonel March.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then he did 20 children's albums, recordings: Rudyard Kipling, Hans Christian Andersen, more. Let's see, I can't name them all, but they're wonderful children's albums, and they're available still on DVD, and they're wonderful for kids. All the wonderful classic fairy tales and stories.
Oh, I'm so thankful, and I hate to be a bother, and you were so generous.
Oh, you're not a bother. You're not a bother at all. No, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Karloff. It's our pleasure, and I'm going to share this and write a few articles up, and I will be in touch, and I'll let you know how it's going.